The sound she heard before she understood it was small, just movement. Footsteps on hardwood that weren't where footsteps were supposed to be at 2 in the afternoon on a Wednesday. Cecily Marsh had driven 4 hours from the conference in Baltimore because she couldn't wait to see Goldie. That was the thing she would return to later, not what she found, but the reason she'd come back early. She'd been in the middle of a panel on pediatric respiratory care when she'd thought, with the sudden clarity of a woman who has been away from her 4-year-old daughter for 3 days. I need to go home right now. She'd excused herself between sessions, skipped the networking dinner she'd already paid for, and driven straight through without stopping, except once for gas, and a terrible cup of coffee outside of Harrisburg. She had not called ahead. She wanted the surprise to be complete. She got a surprise. The front door was unlocked, which meant Sterling was home, which was odd because his car wasn't in the driveway. But the side door from the garage was open a crack, which meant his car was inside, which meant he'd known someone might drive past and look. That detail filed itself away somewhere behind her sternum as she stepped into the entryway and heard the sound. She stood very still for 5 full seconds, the kind of still that isn't really about being quiet. It's about the body processing information the brain hasn't caught up with yet. Then she walked to the living room doorway. Goldie's stuffed rabbit was on the floor just inside the door, one ear bent under it like it had been dropped mid-play and forgotten. Sterling and Portia were on the couch. Portia's hair was down. They hadn't heard Cecily come in. She looked at them for exactly 3 seconds. She counted. Then she bent down and picked up the rabbit. She walked to the kitchen. She did not scream. She did not cry. She did not say a single word, not because she had gone somewhere quiet inside herself, but because the part of her brain that was still functioning had made a decision about what the next 20 minutes were going to look like, and that decision did not include giving either of them the satisfaction of watching her break. She opened the refrigerator and took out the container of cut fruit she'd prepped before leaving Monday morning. She checked the daycare bag hanging from the hook inside the pantry door. She added a juice box, a change of socks because Goldie always lost one somehow, and the small packet of animal crackers that was Goldie's currency for surviving nap time. She set the rabbit on top of the bag. Sterling appeared in the doorway, while she was writing Goldie's name on the new sock with a Sharpie, the way the daycare required. "See," he started. "Don't." She capped the marker. "I need you to let me finish this first." He stopped. She finished the sock. She put the marker back in the drawer where markers lived, because that was where it went. Then she turned around. He looked like a man who had rehearsed 12 different explanations and lost access to all of them simultaneously. His shirt was untucked on one side. He had the expression of someone who believed, at some fundamental level, that the right combination of words could still make this a different kind of moment than it was. He was wrong about that. "I came home early," Cecily said. Her voice was level. It surprised her how level it was, for Goldie. "I know. See, I can explain." "Where is she?" "She's at your mom's. I dropped her." "Okay." She picked up the daycare bag. She picked up the rabbit. "I'm going to get her." "Please don't do this like this. Can we just—" "Do what?" She looked at him. Not with anger. Anger would come later, plenty of it. But right now she was something colder and more precise. "I'm not doing anything. I'm picking up my daughter." Portia was not in the doorway. She was apparently still in the living room, which told Cecily something about whether Portia intended to apologize. She had known Portia Kessler for 9 years. 9 years of birthday brunches and late-night texts, and the specific shorthand of a friendship that has survived enough shared difficulty to feel permanent. 9 years, and Portia was sitting on the couch, waiting to see which way this went before she committed to a position. Cecily did not go to the living room. She went to the bedroom. She changed out of her conference clothes into her normal ones. She washed her face because she had been in a car for 4 hours and her skin felt like highway. She did these things with her whole attention because her whole attention was the only thing keeping her from sitting down on the bathroom floor and not getting up again. When she came back through, Sterling was standing exactly where she'd left him. "We can fix this," he said. "I know how this looks, but we can." A fix implies something broke accidentally. Cecily picked up her keys. "This was a decision. It looks like I made it easy for you by being gone, and it looks like you made it easy for yourself by deciding she was more convenient than I was." She paused at the door. "Have your things out of the bedroom by Friday. I'll be here with Goldie. Where are you going to go tonight?" She thought about it for exactly 1 second. "To my daughter," she said. And then she left. Her mother took one look at her face and did not ask a single question. She just handed Goldie over. Goldie, who was wearing a purple tutu over her jeans and had a smear of peanut butter on her chin, and launched herself at Cecily with the full-body abandon of a child who has no concept of how necessary she is. Cecily held her for a long time, longer than Goldie expected, which was why Goldie eventually said, with the frank consideration of a 4-year-old, "Mama, you're squeezing." "I know, baby. Give me 1 more minute." Goldie gave her 1 more minute. They stayed at a hotel that night, not a nice one. The kind where the continental breakfast is a waffle iron and 3 bananas, and the hallway smells of industrial carpet cleaner. Goldie thought it was the best thing that had ever happened to her. She called it the special sleepover house and asked if they could live there forever. Cecily told her they were going to find a better house, something with a yard. That night, after Goldie was asleep, with the rabbit tucked under one arm, Cecily opened her laptop. There was an email from Dr. Farwell at Portland Children's Hospital. She'd applied for a department head position 8 months ago, during a stretch of professional restlessness she'd eventually set aside. The position was still open. Would she reconsider? She read it 3 times. Then she thought about Sterling's car hidden in the garage. She replied within 10 minutes. The next 6 weeks were the most methodical of Cecily's life, which meant something, because she was a woman who color-coded her patient files and kept a running diagnostic notebook she reviewed every Sunday morning. She did not fall apart. She had Goldie, and Goldie needed someone functional, which meant Cecily needed to be functional, which meant she put the grief in a box labeled later and stacked it neatly in the back of her mind. She filed the separation paperwork herself. She canceled the anniversary reservation they'd made for October. She arranged for Goldie's daycare records to transfer to a program in Portland. She packed 2 cars worth of their actual life, which turned out to be less than she would have expected, and left what was his and took what was hers. She did not call Portia. She had nothing to say that she was willing to say out loud yet. Sterling called 11 times in the first 2 weeks. She listened to none of the voicemails. On day 15, she blocked his number. She felt nothing doing it. The absence of feeling was its own kind of information. Portland did not care who Cecily Marsh was. She drove into the city on a gray Tuesday in October with Goldie asleep in the back seat and a rental address on her phone and the specific exhaustion of someone who has made every possible decision and now just needs to stop making them for a few hours. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building near the hospital. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with actual counter space, a window seat in the living room that Goldie immediately claimed as her reading fort. It smelled like fresh paint. It was nobody's house yet. She unpacked methodically. It took 2 days. When she was done, she put the rabbit on Goldie's bedside table, where it would stay for the next 4 years. She was not okay for a while. She was functional, which was different. She put in her hours. She learned her team. She kept what she needed compressed and what she needed operational, and the 2 categories did not always overlap, but they coexisted, and she moved through her days. A man named Soren Voss came to renovate the waiting room of her satellite pediatric clinic in January. The space was hers to run, the part of the Portland offer she'd found most appealing. The waiting room needed new flooring and better lighting and a wall mural that wasn't as depressing as the existing one, which depicted farm animals in a palette she could only describe as apocalyptic. Soren was quiet and thorough and brought his own thermos every morning. He did not attempt to make conversation with her. He did not comment on the collection of small patient drawings she'd started taping to one corner of the wall even before the renovation was finished. He noticed it, she could tell, because he worked around it without being asked, but he said nothing. She appreciated that more than she would have admitted to anyone. Her capacity for new trust was at zero. The people who sensed that and gave her space were the ones she could breathe around. Everyone else required management. One afternoon in February, she knocked her coffee off the corner of her desk. It rolled under the filing cabinet. She got on her hands and knees and couldn't quite reach it, and made a sound that was not quite a word, but communicated everything about the last 4 months perfectly. Soren appeared from the waiting room, came in without comment, retrieved the cup from under the cabinet, and handed it back to her. "Thank you," she said. "Sure," he said, and went back to the flooring. She thought about that interaction for 3 days, which told her something about the state of her nervous system. Back in Maryland, Sterling was apparently not doing well. She knew this not because she sought the information, but because her cousin Marguerite texted once, "He keeps asking mutual people about you." Not in a threatening way, just asking. "Thought you should know." Cecily read it twice. Then she put the phone face down on her desk. She wrote back, "Don't pass him anything, not even that I'm doing well, especially not that." She meant it, and she moved on. The medical board complaint arrived on a Tuesday in October, exactly 1 year after she'd driven into Portland. She found out the way you find out about things you weren't prepared for. A formal letter delivered to her clinic, stiff and institutional, informing her that a complaint had been filed against her license and that a preliminary review was underway. The complaint alleged that Cecily Marsh had maintained an inappropriate personal relationship with a pharmaceutical sales representative named Curtis Beale, that this relationship had influenced her prescribing patterns at her previous Maryland practice, and that she had falsified certain patient records prior to her departure. She sat in her office and read it 3 times. Curtis Beale was a rep she had met twice at a conference. She had declined his dinner invitation once and never spoken to him again. She was not panicking. She noticed this with some surprise. Her system had moved past panic into something colder and more organized, the same place it had gone on a Wednesday afternoon in her kitchen with a stuffed rabbit in her hand. She called Dr. Farwell. "I've seen it," Dr. Farwell said before Cecily could speak. "I've been on the phone with hospital administration since this morning. It's false, every part of it. I believe you. The question is documentation." "I'm the most documented physician you've ever hired," Cecily said. "Give me 48 hours. She was not wrong. She had her full clinical record going back 7 years. Every prescription decision, every patient note, every conference attendance log, every declined vendor invitation. She had kept records because she was a pediatrician who dealt in small margins, and she had never once been careless with them. She built the archive in 4 days of late nights after Goldie was asleep, sitting at her kitchen table with the rabbit watching from the shelf above the sink. Every claim in the complaint had a corresponding document. Every document had a timestamp and an institutional source. She also noticed on the second night that the specific details, the dates, the name of the rep, the language around her departure from Maryland, were not the kind of details a stranger would know. They were the kind of details someone who had attended conferences with her would know. Someone who had listened to her talk about her practice for 9 years over birthday brunches. Someone who had introduced her to Curtis Beale once in a hotel corridor and who would remember that because she remembered everything that could be useful. She sat with that understanding for a long time in the quiet kitchen. The rabbit did not offer an opinion. The city outside did its late-night thing, indifferent and continuous. She told Soren about it 3 weeks later, the same way she'd told him about Sterling, in the middle of something else, without preamble. They had been talking about whether the patient artwork wall should get its own dedicated lighting fixture, and she said, "I know who filed the complaint. Portia, my former best friend." Soren put down his tape measure. "The details are too specific," she said, "and she knew Curtis Beale. She introduced us at a conference. She knew exactly which name would cause me the most trouble. She looked at the floor. She planned this. She knew I was coming back. She knew when the position would be announced. She had months to put it together. What do you need right now, practically? The hospital's legal team is already moving. I need the documentation airtight, and I need—" She stopped. What she had been about to say was, "I need this to not have happened." She recognized it as the beginning of something expensive and useless, and she stopped it. "I need this to be over," she said instead. Soren put his hand on the work table between them, not on her hand, just on the table, steady, available. She looked at it. Then she put her hand over his, just for a moment. Neither of them said anything. She had not allowed herself to need anything from another person in over a year. The wanting had been there, compressed and quiet, behind a wall she'd built with intention. She was beginning to understand the wall was not invulnerable. The documentation package went to the medical board on a Monday. Penn Alcott helped her organize it. He'd said, "Let's build the strongest possible case without editorializing," which was exactly what she needed. Soren brought dinner to the clinic 3 nights running and said nothing that required a response. The detail that broke it open came from the hospital's legal team, a careful woman named Patricia Drew, who had the specific competence of someone who wins difficult cases by being thorough rather than dramatic. She found the connection. The complaint had been submitted through an anonymous service, but the initial draft had been shared via an email account registered in Portia Kessler's name. There were other connections. By the time Patricia finished building the timeline, the case was not airtight in the beyond reasonable doubt sense, but it was well past the threshold for professional consequence. Sterling called the morning before the board hearing. She answered this time. His number was still blocked on her personal phone, but he'd called the clinic line. "I heard about the complaint," he said. He sounded like someone who had been awake for several days. "I think I know where it came from." "I know where it came from," Cecily said. A long silence. "Portia told me she was going to do something. Back in the spring, I told her not to. I didn't—" He stopped. "I didn't think she actually would. And you didn't call me." "I didn't think." "I know you didn't think." Her voice was steady. It was costing her something. "That's been the consistent pattern, Sterling." Another silence. "I want to submit a statement to the board," he said, "about what Portia told me. I know it doesn't fix anything." Cecily held the phone and looked out the clinic window. The mural was finished now, a forest scene with animals that were bright and specific and nothing like the apocalyptic farm. Goldie had requested the fox be orange, which it was. "Okay," she said, "then do it." "I'm sorry," he said. "I know that's not." "It's not enough, but I hear you." A pause. "Submit the statement. That's what I need from you right now." He submitted it. The board hearing was on a Thursday. Cecily arrived 15 minutes early with a folder of documentation that could have wallpapered the room. Dr. Farwell was in the gallery. Penn was there. Soren was not. She hadn't asked him, and he hadn't offered. Which was right. This was hers to do. She answered every question without performance. When they asked about Curtis Beale, she cited the 2 conference meetings, the declined dinner, the absence of any subsequent contact. When they asked about prescribing patterns, she cited the documented clinical rationale for every prescription in question. When they asked about her previous practice records, she showed them 7 years of documentation organized by date, category, and clinical outcome. She did not get angry. She had already been angry, in private, for 3 weeks. What she brought into the hearing room was precision. The determination came in 2 days. Unfounded, every claim. Her license confirmed without condition. The board noted that the documentation provided was among the most thorough they had reviewed in a disciplinary proceeding. She read it standing in her kitchen at 7:14 in the morning. Goldie was still asleep. The rabbit was on the shelf. She sat down. She breathed. She did not cry, and then after a moment she did, briefly and quietly, into her coffee, because she had been holding something very tight for 3 weeks, and the holding was finally over. Then she got up, made Goldie's breakfast, packed the daycare bag, and went to work. She told her team that morning, just the outcome, not the details. A young resident named Tomas, who had started asking the sharpest diagnostic questions in rounds by week 3, raised his hand slightly and said, "We never doubted it, for the record." The room was quiet in the particular way of people who have decided to let something be true without turning it into a speech. "Thank you," Cecily said. She meant it without ceremony, which was the only way she knew how to mean things. "Now, I need the respiratory case files from the last 2 weeks, and someone needs to explain to me why we have 4 pending referrals sitting unanswered." They got back to work. 3 months later, on a Saturday morning, Goldie came out of her bedroom holding the rabbit by one ear and said, with the considered authority of a 5-year-old who has thought something through, "Mama, I think Henry should live on your shelf now." Henry was the rabbit. He had been Henry since last year, when Goldie had decided he needed a name. Cecily looked at her daughter. "Why?" "Because I'm brave now," Goldie said as if this were obvious. "I don't need him at nighttime anymore. But you might." Cecily sat down on the kitchen floor, right there, and held out her arms, and Goldie walked into them with the rabbit dangling from her fist. "You are very brave," Cecily said into her daughter's hair. "I know," Goldie said. "You are too, probably." Soren came over that afternoon. He'd gotten into the habit of Saturday afternoons, not by invitation, exactly, but by the kind of slow accumulating permission that doesn't announce itself. He brought coffee for her and a specific brand of sparkling juice that Goldie had declared superior to all other beverages after trying it once 3 months ago. He remembered things without being asked to. Goldie showed him Henry immediately and explained the brave situation at length. Soren listened with complete attention and said that Henry seemed like a very good rabbit and that he thought the clinic shelf was an excellent placement for him. Goldie agreed and went off to work on the elaborate floor puzzle she'd been assembling for 2 weeks. Soren handed Cecily her coffee. "Good morning," he said. "It's 1 in the afternoon." "Good afternoon," he said, without any particular change in expression, and she laughed. A real laugh, the involuntary kind that arrives without being assembled. It surprised her a little. He looked at her with an expression she had been slowly learning to receive without deflecting. Like he was paying attention, had been paying attention, and intended to continue. Not the performative attention of someone building something, but the real kind, the kind that remembered sparkling juice and knew when not to ask if she was okay. She let herself look back. "There's something I want to ask you," he said, "and I want you to know you can say no, and it won't change anything between us." She waited. He was quiet for a moment. Soren was a person who chose his words carefully, not out of caution, but precision, a quality she had come to find more reassuring than she'd expected. "I'd like to keep doing this," he said, "whatever this is, more deliberately, if you want to." She turned the coffee cup in her hands. She thought about what deliberately meant from a person like him. She had enough evidence by now to know that it meant consistently, quietly, without requiring her to perform anything she didn't feel. "I need you to understand something first," she said. "Okay. My trust is not a thing I give quickly anymore. It used to be. I thought it was a virtue." She looked at the window, at the Saturday light coming through the glass. "I know the difference now, between faith and evidence. I need evidence." "I know that," he said. "I've been paying attention." "I know you have." She looked at him. "That's the evidence." He said nothing. Goldie's puzzle pieces clicked softly in the other room. Cecily took a breath. "Yes," she said, "I want to." He nodded once, without theater. Then he turned toward the living room and asked Goldie which piece she'd been stuck on, because that was who he was. Cecily stayed in the kitchen for a moment. She put her hand around the coffee cup and felt the warmth in her palm and let herself be in the moment without managing her relationship to it. It was a small thing. She had learned over 4 years that small things were usually the actual things. The stuffed rabbit on the daycare bag, the sock with the Sharpie name, the coffee retrieved from under the filing cabinet without comment, the juice box remembered on a Saturday. Henry the rabbit sat on the clinic shelf on Monday morning. Goldie had personally selected his position, facing the door, so he could see the patients coming in. Cecily hadn't moved him. A child came in that afternoon, gripping a knotted piece of string like a lifeline. She looked at the rabbit on the shelf and pointed. "What's his name?" "Henry," Cecily said. "He looks like a Henry." The girl said it with complete certainty, the way children say things that are simply true. "Can I look at him while you do the scary part?" "You can hold him," Cecily said. She handed over the rabbit. The girl held him carefully, the way children hold things that matter. The exam went fine. When they were leaving, the mother stopped at the door and said something quiet and genuine, and Cecily nodded to it without making it into a moment. After they left, she stood in the exam room for a beat longer than she needed to. She had been a good doctor before all of it, careful, thorough, occasionally brilliant in the way that surprises you when it happens. She was a better doctor now, not because of what she'd survived, but because of what she'd decided to build after. The work had always been who she was. What was different was that she no longer had to hold any part of herself back from it. She picked up the chart for her next patient. She pulled up the notes. She walked into the hall. Behind her, on the shelf above the intake desk, Henry the rabbit faced the door with his bent ear and his patient expression, watching for whoever would come in next. Cecily had stopped looking back at things that were already finished. There was too much ahead of her that wasn't.